13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
Thirteen of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
Thirteen of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your...
On Tower Talks, Mexico's ex-security chief was sentenced in New York for bribery charges. Early voting ends this Friday. a look at the new voting locations at the University of Texas at Austin. Corruption, a hot topic in the current election. An expert panel is here to discuss what corruption looks like on a national and local level. All of this coming up on Tower Talks. Good evening and welcome to Tower Talks, the show where we take a closer look at the stories affecting Texans, Austinites, and students right here at UT Austin. I'm Justin Doud, and tonight we have an expert panel lined up for you to talk about corruption. But before we get into that, a lot is going on around the world and in politics. 2 weeks ago, a former top law enforcement official in the Mexican government was sentenced for his role in bribery. Genaro Garcia Luna was the director of the Federal Investigative Agency from 2001 until 2006, where he was then promoted to Secretary of Public Security of Mexico until 2012. The position led him to working with top U.S. intelligence agencies to slow the trafficking of drugs. However, with his high position in the Mexican government, he worked to shield cartels from arrest and jail time, most notably the Sinaloa cartel, where Luna guarded the smuggling of drugs into the country. The allegations were not presented to the public until his arrest in Dallas, Texas in 2019. This came as he declined to reveal his financial assets to the Mexican government. Further raids against him revealed almost 200 pounds of cocaine and clearer financial records detailing his long stint with the Sinaloa cartel. The security chief was charged and convicted in New York in early 2023 before his sentencing came down this month. He was sentenced for 38 years. Even though U.S. officials have claimed that Mexican President Felipe Calderon knew of the ties Luna had with the cartel, the former president has still insisted he did not. No charges were brought against others in the administration. The conviction and sentencing make Luna the highest-ranking Mexican official ever convicted in the United States. Early voting began last week in Texas. At the University of Texas at Austin, changes to polling locations have led to different student reactions. Let's take a look. Here at the Texas Union, first-time voters are facing long lines as early voting kicks off across the state. Students say that while lines can be intimidating, they're committed to casting their ballot, and that's exactly what they've done. In the first 5 days of early voting, about 20% of registered voters in Travis County cast their ballots. More than 6,000 people have already voted on the UT campus, the majority of which cast their vote at the Texas Union. For some, the consistent lines have been daunting, but they cast their vote regardless.
Honestly, the line is kind of intimidating, but I think I was only waiting in there for like maybe 10-20 minutes. All the voting assistants are very nice. You know, they'll help you if you got questions, but the process is pretty smooth.
This election is the union's first time being utilized as a polling location. Previously, the Flan Academic Center housed UT's main polling center, but it was relocated due to planned construction, according to the university. In addition to the union, the LBJ School of Public Affairs is also available for voters. As students brave long lines ahead of Election Day, they told us why they feel it's worth the wait.
Honestly, I just think it's important because we all live in a government and we're all going to be affected by it, so it's just important to vote, you know, exercise your civic duty and stuff.
There's a lot of important things that are at stake, especially right now, during the presidential election, so that was my main motivation. I want my voice to be heard.
Early voting lasts until November 1st, and Election Day is November 5th. For TSTV News, I'm Justin Doud.
Coming up, we have an expert panel here to discuss corruption. Stay tuned to hear more on recent corruption scandals. Tower Talks will be right back.
"13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
"13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth."
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start.
Welcome back to Tower Talks. Our expert panel tonight includes community organizers with community-powered ATX, Celine Rendon and Misael Ramos, culture chair for the Texas Order, Ava Hosseini, and finally, managing editor and head of recruitment for the Texas Order, Ben Castro. Thank you guys so much for coming on, and welcome.
Thank you for having us. Thanks for having us.
So corruption is in the news constantly these days, whether it's at City Hall in New York or being thrown around on the national campaign trail as it relates to local elections offices. The term is often vaguely used and feared, but the threat true corruption poses to public trust in government and democracy is extreme. To kick tonight's conversation off, can each of you introduce yourself and talk about how you view that term in today's world? What do you define corruption as? We can start with Ben.
Sure, yeah, I can get started with that. So first and foremost, I'm Ben Castro. Looking at that camera, right? I'm Ben Castro, department head for recruitment for the Texas Order, student-run journalist org on campus. My definition of corruption is fairly simple. I think it's something like the abuse of power to benefit yourself unfairly or to benefit people that, like your friends or something like that. I think that sums it up.
All right, sure. Yes, so I'm Ava, I'm with the Texas Order, and so I think the way that I would best define corruption would be something along the lines of systemic manipulation in an effort to get something that is desired either for one person or for a group, but basically abusing a system to inaccurately represent one person's needs or a group's needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, Misael Ramos, community-powered ATX organizer, and honestly, ditto to what you both said. I would say corruption really also stems from using your own influence to basically manipulate something specific for a specific outcome for a group in power and charge.
Oh my gosh, y'all are taking all the great things. Hi y'all, I'm Celine Rendon. I'm also an organizer with Community Powered ATX, and I believe corruption similarly is just an abuse of power that serves the interests and needs of a smaller group, and usually that's like a ruling class or a profit interests.
Yeah. So you're thinking that corruption is more in the service of a group in power and authority.
Okay. Right.
So let's talk a little bit broadly about corruption first, and then we can focus a little bit locally. What do you all view as the dangers of corruption in government specifically? I'd like to hear from everybody if you're all comfortable.
Yeah, well, I can kickstart that. Corruption in government is perhaps, I mean, I'm of the opinion normally that corruption, like local level things matter more, but when it's on the larger scale like that, it's especially insidious because you have like lineages of these like families or these cartels or these groups that disproportionately influence our politics, that affect all of us as citizens. And in that sense, that level of corruption I'm afraid of it. I really am afraid of it.
If I can jump in here, I think that one of the, I agree to some extent. I think, though, also to some extent, corruption in government is kind of inevitable when you think about the perverse incentives that come with cash. I mean, that come with how elections and things within government get financed, who's pooling their money where, which is why, one of the big things that when we're looking at these elections, part of what we're seeing is, like, who is being financed better, who's pooling in how much money. I mean, and this goes for both sides of the aisle. I mean, this is a problem within the Democratic Party as well as it is within the Republican Party. I think the only real difference is the way that they are sort of affronted with it, but it's the same issue. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say to piggyback off of what you just stated as well, when we think about corruption in government and the use of money and the influence that it actually brings, it really gets to the heart of this systemic issue that we have within our politics. Essentially, how politicians can be bought and paid off, and essentially how lobbyists can go to the Capitol here and even the Capitol in DC and basically have their influence imparted. It really takes away from our purpose of our democracy and of our government. And our government is supposed to be for the people, the constituency, actually speaking up and about what they need and what their needs are from their various communities. But if you have someone who is paid off, essentially they don't need to listen to them because if they're a career politician, they can basically just say, well, you're not paying the bills, so why should I actually listen to you, and push their agenda and their other group's agenda. And so, corruption is really at root when we think about it from a systemic side.
Yeah. So I think talking about this, I mean, this could be locally or applied nationally, but thinking like Misael just said about systemic racism and like the disenfranchisement of Black and brown communities across the United States, but especially here in Austin, and how there's this continued cycle of abuse of power that maintains white supremacy, whether we see that in our local politics, but then that trickles down to a lot of our basic needs and resources around housing and affordability. So I think that corruption just it's historical. It's part of like how America was created, and through our laws and policies that's evolved over time from being explicit to now being implicit, and what we see happening in our local elections and in our city government and leadership. And although people have been granted rights, voting rights over time, we still see disenfranchisement happen, and how that shows up in major disparities around access to basic needs on a daily basis.
And it seems like some of that has kind of been ingrained into the law here in this country. When you look at decisions like Citizens United that are limiting campaign finance reform, do you guys feel like, and feel free to jump in depending on how you feel, do you feel like that statement is accurate, that it is ingrained into the law, and if so, to what extent?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that I think to some extent it is de jure, but I think there is definitely the aspect that it is, enforced and reinforced by the people around it, right? I mean, it's as simple as hiring somebody that you sort of, a congressperson hiring an intern that they know. I mean, these are the earlier seeds of corruption. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, I would argue that this is something that you see that is ingrained within the law. With that said, to some extent, I have faith in the democratic system insofar as, like, this is something that we are weeding out and that we are sort of trying to weed out over time. But by no means is it over. I mean, by no means is the fight over, yeah.
There was actually, a couple of years ago, there was actually a policy that was put forth in which here in Austin, they were trying to limit campaign funding. Unfortunately, that did not pass. These are the type of policies that we really need to like start looking to enact, not only here locally, but also on the state level and also nationally, because there's certain amounts of money that folks can bring into their campaign, but that doesn't stop PACs, political action committees, to essentially take millions of dollars. I mean, we're seeing it at a national scale right now with Elon Musk basically paying people to go vote for Trump. So essentially, if we're not putting these rules and regulations in place to limit how much money goes into these campaigns, and then essentially we're really not doing ourselves a favor over time and getting real, true candidates who actually should be out there.
So when it comes to corruption in the private sector, do you feel that the dangers are different there? Is it more necessary for government to avoid corruption than private industry?
Yes. I mean, I think that the real difference is that the government has a responsibility to its people, and private industry doesn't necessarily have a responsibility to anyone other than the people who are buying in. But, if you're born in this country, if you live in this country, you are subject to its rules, and therefore you should be subject to its rights.
It's the same body, two heads, right?
Yeah, well, there you go.
So if government is more kind of at the will of the people, do you think that companies or private industries are less accountable to the public, or can you talk a little bit about the public's ability to hold private industry accountable?
Boycotts, right? I mean, that's an easy way. Just refusing to buy in on their products, just like Ava mentioned. Yeah. They're dependent on someone to buy into them. Otherwise, they go out of business. Oh, that's the hope,
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is just, like you said, two heads, one body. But the bottom line kind of is that that relationship needs to be severed. I mean, I think that's the big thing, is that business and the government are absolutely separate entities, or at least they ought to be, and that's the first step. Yeah.
And it's really tough, in our capitalistic system, to really rein in these private corporations and companies, because essentially all they're trying to do is make money, right? I think I go back to my econ professor, Econ 101, and I only got to 102, and that's where I stopped. But Econ 101, basically what my professor had told us was, remember that a business's whole existence or being is to make money and benefits its shareholders. And when you think about it from that, it's a very capitalistic way of thinking, so of course they're going to do whatever it takes. And back to y'all's points of boycotting certain corporations that do harm, that do bad, that are corrupt, and also organizing, getting folks organized so that they're able to go out and picket and lobby against whatever's happening within these companies that they work for. I'm a true believer in people power, and I really do believe that when folks get together and have a collective voice, that they actually can move the needle on things.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh no, just for Misael's point, coming from community-powered ATX, and I think we were talking about this before it started around unions and their role in this space to hold private industries accountable. And back to government and our belief of how it should be regulated and serve the interests of the people. And right now we're seeing, especially here in Austin, the city of Austin facilitating private interests to be shown in our policies that are directly impacting our housing landscape here in Austin. But this is not just happening here in Austin, it's happening in the RGV and in San Antonio. So the government is playing a role in bringing in those private interests to facilitate a lot of destruction and corruption.
Really quick, if you don't mind, I want to go back to to our discussion about boycotting. I think the really difficult thing, and I think that boycotting shouldn't exist without also supporting like independent stores and smaller grassroots areas, because you get into these big corporations, and the more research you do, the more that you realize that this is all kind of the same issue across the board. And I think that part of it is putting your money where your mouth is, putting your money where your home is, supporting independent businesses, supporting individuals, mom and pop shops, families. Those are the people on the backs of which like this economy was built, and those are the people that ought to be supported, and not Chevron, ExxonMobil, McDonald's.
Some people have, when you're referring to boycotts, they look at the movement as a whole, and are concerned that it's kind of a position of privilege, and that there's a higher economic cost when you're looking at boycotting in some industries. Do you guys have any advice for finding ways to move around any barriers that could be in place to boycott effectively?
Sure. I mean, I think that part of it is that, yes, it's true that this is a systemic issue also, as far as, a lot of people maybe can't afford anything other than the convenience of certain brands and of certain lifestyles. With that said, I think that there is still some adjustment that almost everybody, I would venture to guess, has the capacity to make, and as far as we can, we should.
Regarding unions and like strike action, that kind of thing, I understand that striking is a very tough. It puts workers in a very tough spot financially because they're out of the job. So I would recommend, if you're going to strike, you need to have it planned out ahead of time. Maybe when the contract is at the end of its, when it's set for re-contract seasons. But from that angle, you need to have a strike fund. So your dues hopefully don't just go to some fat union boss in like Michigan or something. Hopefully your dues can go to a strike fund, and you need to pay attention to where your dues do go. The strike fund that could support you and your family while you're out of the job, looking for better work and keeping your companies accountable.
Yeah, a lot of our work that we've seen a lot of great value in is working across unions. We had the founder of the Amazon Labor Union come down to Austin to be part of a panel with our organizers during boycotting South by Southwest, which was amazing. And boycotting works. I think we're seeing that happen around the Palestine protesting that's been happening. When you are attacking these large corporations' revenue streams, that hurts their wallets, that hurts everything that they have built a foundation on. So I think it definitely works, and it just takes people power. And again, organizing and having a solidified plan that's backed by the masses, right? And so and if you're putting people over profit, like anything could be possible if you just have an organized mass of people towards a common goal on boycotting.
And for anyone that's not kind of in tune with what's happening, you're referring to Starbucks and McDonald's.
Yeah, Starbucks. Yeah, McDonald's. They've hit super low on their revenue. They've had to close stores across the U.S. So it does matter. There is a trickle down effect that is happening.
And for people, I would also say, looking at support from like communities. Look at your community when you do decide to boycott something, or when you do decide to go on strike. We're in an age now where we're really actually very much so connected. I know the pandemic kind of made us take a shift and a lot of folks were isolated, but we are still really connected and can be really connected. And so really just ensuring that you're making those inroads with your community so that when you do take these steps, you have that support system also to back you. And ditto to what Ben had mentioned, I just want to express that as well. Make sure that your union dues are actually going towards some type of fund so that whenever someone gets into some type of mishap during life, that there's something that they can tap into. It's very much so needed to have those resources on hand as well.
And so before the show, we were talking about a little bit about unions, like you were saying, Celine, but we were also talking about how unions can be corrupted themselves. Do y'all want to talk a little bit about that, or about your experience with that? Anybody?
Unions need unions. It's kind of funny, right? It's just, you need to parrot that again and again. Unions need unions. The ideal of a union is it's countering corruption, within an institution, but a union is an institution, so it's like a little Russian nesting doll, you know what I mean? That's my opinion on that.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah, I think just ensuring transparency and, like Misa was saying, where your union dues are going, but also the leadership. I think a lot of people instantly hear the word union and think, oh, that's great. But a lot of times there is corruption, there is, you can typically see happening is like two people making decisions for the whole group. So just making sure that there's transparency, there's regulations, there's a democratic way of how decisions are being made. And just for a real life example, and what we come across against is like you see unions across Austin endorsing a policy or endorsing candidates or leaders for the city around policies are really harmful. So you think, why is this union supporting this issue? But then if you're organizing, you talk to folks, you really come to realize that a lot of those groups the decisions are being made by one or two people that have interests that are connected to profit over people. So that's what we've run in our work a lot of the time.
So I think there's one really interesting case example to look at, and it hits that time peg too, is the Austin Police Association, which is Austin's police union, and their passing of the city council's passing of the Austin police contract that was approved last week in a 10-1 vote at the Austin City Council. So that contract is negotiated between the Austin Police Association and the City of Austin, and there was some controversy around the contract, specifically in regard to personnel files, which are colloquially known as G files, and about the public's access to those. So the Police Accountability or the Police Oversight Act was passed in 2023, and that was kind of mandating that. That there be a public access to these records. And in the contract, it appears as though there's kind of nothing being grandfathered in there. So files going forward will have access for the public, but files retroactively may not. Can you talk a little bit about that example, specifically if you're familiar, and about how a union may be serving one interest in that specific situation, but where it may not be serving the overall good in a government capacity?
Well,
Anyone?
Yeah, well, I think that the really interesting and really important thing to know here is that, the difference between a lot of the unions that we've been discussing here right now and the police union is that the police are meant to serve the people, and the workers are ultimately what they're doing is like they're working to make a living. I mean, they're working for survival. They're not necessarily there's not necessarily this larger duty to a body of people. But on the other hand, as far as police officers go, as far as any government official goes, this is a responsibility that you have to serve your constituency. I suppose it wouldn't be constituency, but to serve the individuals who are in your precinct or in your area. And I mean, ultimately, that's the difference. So we were talking about government and business severing ties, and I think that this is a great example that, the Austin Police Department is not really a business. It is a government entity.
Does anybody else?
Yeah, I think when we think about policing, there's an aspect to it that we have to really also be aware of, and that's the whole mystique of the blue shield and how real that is. And police are going to look out for police, and so that that's very much reflected in this policing contract. Essentially, with this passing, the G files, you actually aren't going to be able to see a police officer's history. So if that police officer had, a history of hurting people while on the job or doing whatever, you won't have that information until something else happens. And so if we're really looking at it, back to your point about serving, kind of being self-serving, I think this is a very great example of an organization being self-serving, but also being self-serving in the way that really handicaps the people that it's actually meant to help. and I could go on and on about this.
Well, and I think that, you know, particularly with police officers and the records of police officers, I mean, given since, I mean, the dawn of time, this has been a really tumultuous relationship that police officers have had with like the people of the United States and particularly marginalized communities, and I think that this is part of why obviously they wouldn't want people to see their records, is in order to prevent an uproar like the George Floyd protests, like the Black Lives Matter protests. And I think that, like, I mean, it's an outrage, and I think that really what it's doing is it's taking advantage of a system like the union system for personal gain, and ultimately, like, this is fodder for the government and not necessarily for the union workers. For the, you know, this is for the police officers and not the people who they have a responsibility towards, because they are government workers.
Yeah, overall this contract just makes real police oversight illegal. That's just what it does.
We need more transparency, not less.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, with that, we will go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll dive a little bit more into local corruption.
Thirteen of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth.
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members kept texting me not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
Welcome back to Tower Talks. So, Misael and Celine, you've both worked with the City of Austin before in varying capacities. Can you each talk a little bit about your experience with an entity as complex as the government running the 10th largest city and the examples of corruption that you've both encountered in the past here in Austin?
Sure. I guess I could go. So I graduated from UT in 2019, environmental science alumni, and right after that I worked with the City of Austin for about 2 years. I was a community engagement specialist with the Office of Sustainability, and I learned in just that short amount of time just how the city overall functions. I think a lot of the public sees city council and the mayor set up and thinking that that's how decisions are made on a daily basis, and to an extent, yes, but there's also the city manager and the assistant city managers that oversee all departments across the city who do the programming and departmental infrastructure policy work. So it's really interesting that we don't have a transparent idea of what that government system's set up like. And I think too, for me, I just learned how decisions were being made and how it didn't really match about the needs that are actually happening across Austin and the very issues that we're facing. For example, affordability in housing was the #1 concern we heard people talking about as it related to climate issues. But it was interesting how it was so often well, we're talking about climate, not housing, but we are talking about housing. That has everything to do with that. So the siloing, I think, is one way of that does that systemic barrier around addressing real issues defined by the community, but also the city really is listening to how city council and the mayor and assistant city managers make decisions, and it's not necessarily, even if we have different opinions of the best, serving the best interests of community members, you still are answering to that body of decision makers, and it's not transparent at all. I think there's a lot more that could be transparent, and during that time was what I ran into specifically around like corruption or no accountability, and seeing these things happen around the George Floyd protests and police accountability. Like all those things were coming up all the time.
Someone who's appointed and not directly
yes.
accountable to the voters.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, so I've been doing a lot of community organizing and also like very much grassroots community organizing, getting neighborhoods involved. And one of the biggest things that biggest obstacles that I've seen are inaccessibility. So it's really hard to quote unquote access the government, just because the folks that you're organizing with that are, have these lived experiences, a lot of them actually can't take the time out of their day to go to, a city council meeting or to go to a planning commission meeting, or public hearing or anything like that. And so essentially just thinking about how much of a barrier that is, it has always stood out to me as a huge problem. The other issue is how it all functions. I think that just, coming from, that grassroots level and having conversations and advocating and bringing people to City Hall, just having the knowledge of, oh, this thing is going to pass and there's going to be 3 readings. Not everybody has, that type of detail or institutional knowledge. And so, for what I've been learning quite a bit is a lot of it comes with, education and engagement in that sense, but also really trying to tackle ways of being creative to get more accessibility for folks. And those are the things that I'd probably say I've seen the most.
Yeah, and it's intentionally designed in that way to make it, corruption, to make it inaccessible for people to come out and advocate. And even when you do have hundreds, and we'll probably talk about that, but even when you do have hundreds and hundreds of people that come out and say, no, we don't consent to this, council will still go and make a decision that goes against the needs of most people in Austin.
Yeah, there was actually, council was
sued not too long ago and taken to court because essentially they weren't allowing people to actually speak. They were making people basically bunch their speaking items into one 2-minute talk off. But in actuality, in the city's charter, you have to be able to give people whatever the 2 to 3 minutes for each agenda point that they sign up for. And so when we see this type of stuff happen, this is like corruption on a lower level-ish, but essentially it goes back to that inaccessibility that Selena was mentioning and talking about as like a real-life example.
Right. And I think that we saw some of that last week with the police contract. The city council meeting went over 10 hours in its totality, and the vast majority of that was public comment. I think it was 7 to 8 hours of public comment, if not more. So people obviously have very strong opinions that they want to share, but not everybody may have the time to go for 10 hours, or even 5 minutes if it's a normal city council meeting. So kind of, Celine, talking about the environment specifically, is avoiding corruption when working on environmental issues more difficult than in other areas? Is it easier? What's it kind of like in the field? I feel like you don't hear a lot about encountering corruption when it comes to environmental issues.
So when I was a student, I was similar to Misael. I was working a really grassroots in an organizing role in environmental justice work in East Austin. And you would think that working in the environment, there's more transparency, or that everyone cares about the environment, so we'd be making good decisions. But If you're working in the environmental justice field as an organizer, you come in contact with corruption all the time. These issues around private interests and big business and exploitive industries comes up all the time. Locally here in Austin, that's usually the incentive for growth, and the impact on the environment is not. And as an organizer too, in environmental justice and how people of color define the environment incorporates our housing, our communities, our neighborhoods, where we eat, pray, play, and live. And that's not how it's defined by decision makers or extractive industries, and how they're totally taking over and making decisions that are bad for the environment and for people. So I would say it's one and the same. And I think that's why our coalition is made up of many organizations of Black and brown leaders across the Eastern Crescent, whether it's environmental justice, mutual aid efforts, tenant organizing, renters' rights, and other such issues, or like a police accountability. All of our issues are really the same, in the same extractive industries or exploitive or corrupt leaders we're kind of all battling the same issues.
Right. And Ms. Hale, you've run for office in the past here in Austin. Did you encounter difficulties in that experience that you would qualify as corruption?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say the biggest issue, and we kind of touched on this earlier, was the money and the financing. I truly believe that, when folks run, whether it's me or whoever else, and they're really driven by the community, the tough thing behind that is you have to have the financing as well to match it. I do totally believe in internal optimists, so I do totally believe in the amount of people power that can push a person or a candidate over the top, essentially, because at the end of the day it does come down to the vote. But financing and looking for candidates who are actually going to be properly funded is really tough. And so my experience in particular, it was I went up against an incumbent who was well funded. I think she was funded 10-1 in comparison, and we got second place, and I was really proud of that. And it just goes back to show that you can have the community behind you, and you can have all of these things that's propelling you, but also, do you have that funding? And that's one thing that I hate to admit it, that it's a big crux when it comes to politics and running campaigns, but it's a truth. It's a truth.
And I think that you see that on the national level, but also at the local level. We were talking about this a little bit earlier. There are examples right now on the national stage where millions, if not billions, of dollars are being poured into to supporting a candidate in a very disproportionate manner. But then you look at the Austin mayoral race, and the incumbent is spending more than 9 times more than the next closest leader when it comes to fundraising efforts. And that's someone who's already has a leg up because they are the incumbent. So regarding whistleblowers, you've both said that you have, it was a good transition, I thought. You've both said that you have experience with whistleblowers related to the city of Austin. Can you talk a little bit about what those experiences were like?
Yeah, I honestly don't want to share too much, just because it's an ongoing thing that's happening, so it's kind of crucial in some spaces. But I was sharing, I worked at the city. I think there's a lot of people at the city that understand and see what's happening internally and how it's not meeting the needs for the communities that are most directly impacted as it relates to housing displacement, gentrification, and so on. So I think too, the culture right now at the city of Austin is very much, it's not good. I think under Kirk Watson's mayoral supervision, a lot of people are kind of scared, or and I've heard different things from different folks from all over, of just how it's totally changed the culture, I think, around not just City Hall and city council members, but also across city departments across the city of Austin. And it's just kind of going backwards in how policy is being made, decisions are being made. People, you know, might have the fear of speaking out against what they know is not right that's happening at the city level. So I think that's an ongoing issue that's really the worst that it's ever been, I think, at this time in this slate of council members and leadership. And we keep going back to like follow the money. That's like a big thing that we always look at is following the money. Who are these different things connected to? It's kind of like that meme of that guy with the push pins linking everything. It really is just like that, linking who's making decisions and who that's being influenced by. So yeah, I think that's the whistleblowing is really important to look at, but also getting the right media traction for that, because you can have these things that are exposed and showed to the public, but if the dominant narrative or the dominant media is not telling that story and putting it out in the right channels, the right exposure it needs, it's not going to go anywhere. So I think that's really important for us. To really emphasize and like where the role the media plays in that type of whistleblowing complaints and such.
And that leads us really well into what we're going to talk about next, which is the role of journalism in corruption. But then also, before we jump onto that, to kind of close out the whistleblower section, when whistleblowers expose corruption through questionable means or means that have been made illegal through law or charter, is that justified? Do you feel like it depends on the circumstance? Do you feel like, where do you feel like the line is there?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, the great answer in law is always that it depends, because, you know, if men were angels, there would be no need for government, right? If we were perfect, there would be no need for laws, and also our laws can be systemically flawed. This can be an issue, and yeah, I mean, businesses will, and the government will do what it takes to shield itself from accountability in a lot of circumstances, but I think that it depends on the law, it depends on the whistleblowing, but for the most part, I am in favor of the truth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's totally justified. I don't think there's a time when it's not justified. To tell you the truth. Yeah, I'm a free speech expert. Remember last week? Sure. Listen. It's a strange term, whistleblower. Like, what, is just someone who's just exposing something? Is it free speech? It's a little strange.
Yeah.
Saying the truth.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Let's do some bravery here. That's how you really fight corruption.
Yeah. And honestly, also like, we should be protecting our whistleblowers when they come out, and ensuring you know that when they expose something, we're actually like reinforcing that behavior, because that's just basically saying that this person is walking with integrity and they have to get it out there.
I will say, I completely agree. I think that part of the struggle, though, is when allegations can be proven true or false. I think that part of the issue is that some whistleblowing might be jumping the gun before there's actually enough evidence, something like that, which isn't necessarily to say that, you know, whistleblowers are all lying or anything of the sort. But part of the issue is just that I think that with such a sensitive topic, it's really, really easy to kind of stray from the path and do the wrong thing when meaning to do the right thing, or, you know, and of course even whistleblowing can be for corrupt means. Yeah. I just think that it depends on the circumstance.
Oof, yeah.
That's a good.
Well, for now we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to continue in this vein, bring you guys a little bit more into the conversation, and then close it out.
Sounds great.
"13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit proof of sex assigned at birth."
I know deep down they would probably want to stay with the university.
No way in hell anybody's going to tell my daughters what to do with their bodies.
This state is one of the worst in child education.
We can't take it anymore, seeing those scenes.
Going to Hillel on Friday night, all my family members like kept like texting me like not to go.
There's a huge housing crisis in Austin. Do you have a plan in place to address this issue? Determined to start your day well? We're up bright and early. From the enriching local stories to the weather forecast later in the day. Rain or shine, at Good Morning Longhorns, we got you covered. Comprised of a studious reporting staff going lengths to get that scoop, and a talented technical team to enhance your screen visually. As a fellow Longhorn, your mornings are better with us. So start your day the Vivo way. Good Morning Longhorns, Wednesdays at 7 a.m. Central Time on TSTV.
Welcome back to Tower Talks. We could talk about this all day. There's a lot to talk about with corruption. It's a very broad topic, but we are nearing the end of our time together. So I want to point out, according to a 2023 Pew Research Center analysis, in the past 8 years alone, the percentage of Americans that say that they follow the news closely has declined more than 10%, falling from 51% in 2016 to 38% in 2022, well below half. In an age when traditional news consumption is on the decline, and when, according to the Associated Press, local news is dying, what's the best way to combat corruption and hold local officials accountable?
Local news, even though it's dying, we can revive it. I have faith in that. That's why I'm a part of student journalist orgs on campus, like the Texas Order.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that part of it is also that, you know, with the digital age, everything has changed. I mean, maybe it is that we need to be changing our formats. Maybe, you know, the media needs to reconsider what it looks like and needs to reshape itself. But I think that part of it is, I mean, it's because of the corruption in media that is causing people to tune out, is that they feel like they can't trust the news. Really the issue is, and I mean, this is true for me, and I talk about this all the time, and we were talking about this backstage beforehand, that like, part of the issue really is, it's money. It's where's the money going? Even with something like student journalism. I mean, I was formerly an associate editor on the Daily Texan, and part of the reason that I left, I was on the opinion department, and I felt that because I was getting paid through Texas Media, because there was somebody who was in the university press who was signing my checks, I had an obligation to uphold certain narratives, both about the university and about my own opinions. I didn't really feel like, I felt like the things that I had to say about the university, or just my opinions, were being curtailed. Which is why I joined the Texas Order, and I'm proud to be on the Texas Order, because even though I'm not getting paid, what I do have is I've got free reign to write about what I want, and as long as it's not factually incorrect, and as long as it is not libelous or violent, then I can say it.
I was going to also kind of piggyback off of what was mentioned earlier, and supporting independent news media as well, like the Austin Free Press, and folks who are actually out here, you know, trying to get the stories of the people out there. I think, like, they're trying to also explore avenues and ways to engage readers, and that's, you know, TikTok shorts, IG posts, and also having the long format. And I think, like, we need to really support those independent folks.
Yeah, I would. What's common theme in our work as organizers with community-powered ATX is our understanding that whoever controls the media controls the narrative. And we love local journalists that want to tell our story accurately, that's contextual, that gets all the nuances. I think it's so hard to find good writers that want to put out our story, that aren't profit-driven, that aren't corrupted on their editorial board. I was really, really disappointed with the Austin Chronicle and their editorial board and their endorsement process, because it just, for the local elections this year in Austin, it just totally ignored like the history and work for a lot of the candidates, and you could totally tell it was leaning towards one side of the spectrum. So yeah, whoever controls media controls the narrative, and that's really important in our work. We rely a lot on social media. We've written op-eds, so getting in touch with local journalists, Austin Free Press has been awesome in covering our stuff, and yeah, getting the word out there, because a lot of people don't know what's happening. A lot of people don't know the stories that's happening, boots on the ground in the local communities here along the Eastern Crescent, development that's happening that happens so fast, that's not transparent. So it's really important, and that's something that we need a lot of help with, but it's hard when a lot of everything is very capitalistic and money incentive driven.
Right. Well, I think that is a fantastic place to end this. If you guys want to go ahead and tell the folks where they can follow along with community-powered ATX, and then where they can follow the Texas Order.
Yes. So yes, community-powered ATX. You can find us definitely on Instagram. That's where we're biggest right now. We're also community-powered ATX on Twitter and Facebook. It's the same name, community-powered with an ED, ATX. And yeah, we're growing. We're always interested in working with students that have so many talents and capabilities and unique things that they want to offer. Again, anti-displacement, anti-gentrification efforts, so definitely get in touch with us. We love working with students and the creativity y'all bring.
We're constantly onboarding and bringing in new folks, so yeah, join along.
How about the Texas Order?
Sure, so you can find us on Instagram at, I believe, at the Texas Order, but we will definitely be online if you look up Texas Order UT or just the Texas Order. We are definitely there. If you're interested in applying, if you have any op-eds, please let us know. We would be more than willing to take a look at your work.
We'd love to have them.
Yes.
Right. Well, that is it for our discussion today. Thank you all very much for coming. We hope that you were able to inform us more on corruption, and we appreciate you being open to this discussion. Tower Talks will be off next week, but stay tuned for a TSTV News special election episode on Tuesday, November 5th at 8 p.m. Be sure to follow us on social media at TSTV News on X, formerly Twitter, and at Tower Talks TSTV on Instagram. Check us out at tstv.news online and subscribe to our newsletter, Newsroom Notes. From all of us here in the studio, thank you for joining us this evening, and good night.
"13 of the 48 club sports offered by the university now require students to submit